how do you think social media, like digital interfaces and the internet more broadly, has changed the way humans interact with each other and our environment, and what kinds of effects do you think has it had on society?
Yeah, I think it's had huge effects, right? I think we're running this big social experiment right now on how we interact with each other and mental health and how we regard each other. And so again, like there's all of these technologies, have like certain affordances, right? And they allow you, or they make it easier for you to do, to act in a certain way, or they make it harder for you to act in another way, right? And so even just say like texting, it's a tiny box, right? And so that's going to it's going to invite you to have very short conversations, right? Like it doesn't make sense to have this long, in-depth conversation on this tiny little text box, right? And it's going to, right? So it's going to make you, it's going to invite you to, or use emojis, right? That, or, and things that are like subject to sort of to misinterpretation. And so that's going to change the way we interact. Like it can be super helpful, right? It can make right? And it invites us to maybe communicate more. So, just quick, oh, good. This lets me, say I'm going to be late for dinner, or, don't forget to let the cat out, like things like that, or quick hi. And that's great. But like for other kinds of relationships, like is it changing the way, and like things like Twitter too, right? Yeah. Short, right? These that prioritize like short
Just like
bursts
a word limit,
of, right? Like little sound bites of, right? Twitter limits it, right?
Yes.
That's gonna invite certain kinds of speech, and it's again short soundbite kind of speech. And so if we maybe we lose something if we really start relying on those short form, speech. Maybe because we are less face to face, right? There's all kinds of questions about this. If we don't interact as much face to face, maybe we it's harder to see the other person as another human, right? And it's easier to treat them badly, like that you would never do, or it would be harder for you to do face to face, right? It would be harder sort of psychologically to, like break up with someone, right? Say something that they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Or flake, or flake out on, right, some commitment that you had, like, oh yeah, something came up, I'm not going to be there for dinner tonight. I think it does in some ways, like
like the confrontations you can just say off a text, not even call them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think the anonymity and how widely available it is, how's that changed like human psychology? Are we more inclined towards sociopathic behaviors?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Like scientifically, right? Do we have more sociopaths? But certainly, and again, like anonymity can help people, right? Like it can, again, people can find like their people, right? So if they're struggling with, a mental health issue, or they're struggling to find people that they think can understand what they're going through, right? This is great that the internet can help. Or just, you have some little niche interest, you can find your people online. But when it's anonymous, and people may disclose more, right? Like they can speak freely under sort of the cloak of anonymity. And so if this helps them express themselves, in ways that they would be vulnerable, if they had to use their name, they can disclose more, and that's maybe good in some situations.
Like
whistleblowers, right?
Yeah.
Or even like if you're like, I don't know, seeking some kind of like support group, right? Like, or some kind of therapy where you can say like, oh my gosh, I'm going through all of this. I can't tell any of my friends, but you can disclose to people. On the other hand, just like you said, like it also means people can be do very bad things under the right under the cloak of anonymity. So like cyberbullying and again like hate speech and
like trolling and
like
stuff.
trolling. Yeah.
It's interesting because, on one hand you have that potential for whistleblowers, and it can help out people. You can seek out therapy and stuff like that, but also it can cause sociopathic behaviors.
Yeah. Well, then like the Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen, right? Who
What did he do?
She was high up in Facebook and worked on like their civil. I can't remember the name exactly off the top of my head, but she exposed publicly that Facebook's own research showed that Instagram was bad for teenage girls' mental health, right? So again, like if you're talking about how do we relate to each other, they knew that teenage girls used Instagram, and that made them feel worse about themselves, made them feel worse about their bodies, made them feel like they were missing out, that everybody had better lives than them, and that this was affecting their mental health. And like that, oh, well, I'm not as pretty as her, I'm not as thin as her, I'm not as rich as her, I'm not, like it's having effects on teenage girls' mental health. There's some people dispute this still, but it does seem like the research is kind of converging on like that this is the most likely sort of cause for the rise in mental health problems for young women.
Yeah, especially because Facebook, it was in-house research, would be biased towards saying that there wasn't really.
Right, but even their own research,
Yeah.
showed, suggested that this was happening. And that, they know that the posts that get the most eyeballs and the most attention are, like, inflammatory, right? They're extreme, and so those posts are going to keep your attention on the platform. And so they're promoting those posts because that way they can sell more ads. And so they know, too, that these kind of, not so much teenage girls, but like political, right? Like extreme political posts, right? That might be inflammatory, that might, that are extreme, are going to get the most eyeballs. And so Facebook also knows this. And yet they promote those posts, right? Because it's going to get them advertising. So it's changing the way, right? So again, it's changing the way we're interacting with each other too, because it's polarizing us, right? Because our views. So what it does is we get into our echo chambers, right? Because it also just gives us posts that we want to hear, we want to see, that we've indicated that we're interested in, right? And so we get kind of shuffled into this like echo chamber or filter bubble, right? Where then that's like all we're getting. And we get more and more extreme posts that are going to like reaffirm our beliefs and actually make us believe this more strongly. And we're not getting actually even that free speech exchange where your views are challenged by the other, right? By another position, by another opinion. We're just kind of locked in. And so we're not talking to each other, and we're getting more extreme in our views, and I think that social media has had a big part of that in that.
Because when it's a digital interaction, you can just turn the other person off or like block them.
And that's another thing, right? You can block them if you want,
you can't
right?
do that in person.
Right, you can't do that in person. You can't. There was this I just thought it was so almost like moving. This was when Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court Justice, was being confirmed. And if you remember, he was accused of sexual assault by Christine Blasey Ford. And, so she had told her story. There was this big debate, very heated, right? Like very heated issue about whether he had done this. He denied it. Very contentious. And so there was like a lot of protests against his confirmation in the Supreme Court. And a woman, this was caught on tape, like so one of the senators, Jeff Flake, I think he indicated that he would vote to confirm him. And a woman like came up to him in Congress and just was like, just so emotional, like, and protesting. Like, she's like, how can you look at me and vote for him? Like, how can you explain how you're going to look at me? And you could tell, like, she was very passionate, and you could tell that he was like uncomfortable, you know, and like, and, you know, he couldn't, again, just block her, you know, not pay attention to her. He had to confront her. Like, he had to be in that space where he had to listen to her. So so that's another, I think you're right, that's another way that it changes. We can, if it's not convenient for us, we just don't have to listen or respond or look at it. We can block it, right?
Yeah, just silence it. Yeah.
Just silence it. Yeah.